All right. Well, welcome you guys. Thank you so much for showing up today. And I hope that you get some really useful information out of today. So we are here today to talk about improving communication in your relationship. And while you might be here because you want to improve communication with your partner, I found that when we learn these skills, we can apply these to every relationship, right? So as I've learned how to do this, and I've taught other women and couples how to do this, they've also gone on to improve relationships with friends or relationships with their children. So it really is something that can improve all relationships in your life. So I want to, for those that don't know me, I'm going to share a little bit about who I am and why I'm teaching this. Denise Fitzpatrick. I am a licensed counselor in the state of Massachusetts, and I have been for 20 years. I moved into the coaching space about 5 years ago, and I've been working primarily in all things relationships for the last decade. And not only that, like all of the credential stuff, but I've been married for 22 years. And 10 years ago, my marriage was at an all-time low. And a lot of that stemmed from communication problems, right? Getting caught up in these same negative cycles of reacting to each other. And I would say more so it was me reacting to him. If we didn't agree on something, you know, I made him wrong for a lot of things. And it was this kind of constant me sort of pursuing more from him or pursuing him to be different. And the more I pursued that, the more he resisted. And then the more he resisted, the more I pursued. And we just got really caught up in this negative cycle. Lots of resentment, lots of anger, and feeling really disconnected, like, how is this ever possibly going to work? Like and I didn't want to leave my marriage. I wanted to stay married. I just didn't know how to make it work. And so after just feeling for years of feeling this, I really decided I've got to figure out what I can do to make me happy and to make this relationship better. So I started turning the focus on myself and figuring out what I could do. And I started to talk in different ways. I started to communicate differently with my husband. I started to make that shift. And when I did, everything changed, right? Because here I was wanting him to change for so many years and sort of giving my power away by feeling like he had to do something different, when all along it was I had the power to do something different and completely change our relationship. And so I have to say that, you know, I am the happiest I've ever been in the 22 years that we've been married. And not only that, I definitely became a way better parent I have 2 teenage boys, 19 and 17. I definitely became a way better parent when I started to embrace this new way of being and really take responsibility for myself. And so that's why I'm so passionate about teaching other women and helping couples learn how to do this stuff so they can have the relationship they truly want. Because most of us feel like it's kind of a dead end, like, what do I do, without realizing, because none of us are taught this stuff, so we don't know. But it really is, there are some simple things, some simple shifts and some simple changes that you can make that will change the way you engage with your partner. So let me share my screen, because I'm going to dive in and I've got some slides. Let me make sure I can do this okay. I don't want to disconnect anybody. Share screen. Wait a second. Okay. I swear I'm getting this. All right. Okay, can you guys see it? Yes. Okay.
Yes, I can see it. I can see the cover screen.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
Yep.
Let me just move you up there. All right, so you guys are here to learn 3 secrets to get your partner to listen to you. Now, the way that I work with my clients, it's really kind of a 3-part framework, and it's mindset, your relationship with yourself, and then communication. And all those parts kind of work interchangeably and together. And for today, what I'm going to share with you is 2 communication strategies, tips, tools, whatever you want to call them, that are going to help you change the way you communicate. And the marriage mindset and the relationship with self is all part of that, but I'm going to address these 2 specific skills. And communication really is the key to connection, right? And I picked out these 2 quotes because I thought they were, I really like them. Ultimately, the bond of all companionship, whether in marriage or in friendship, is conversation. And then the second one is just so true. The way we communicate with others and with ourselves ultimately determines the quality of our lives. Okay, so I've got bad news and good news. The bad news is that most of what we do in relationship is a habit, and habits are hard to break. The good news is most of what happens in relationships is a habit. Habits can be changed. All right, let me make sure I move you guys up there. Okay. All right. Now, here are the most common struggles that I hear from the people that I work with. And if there's anything that anybody here wants to add that these don't resonate and something else does, feel free to share. You have conversations that end up turning into senseless arguments, or you have the same arguments over and over with no resolution. You feel misunderstood and not heard. And you sometimes don't like the way you react to things. And then what happens is you end up holding back from saying what you really want to say because you want to avoid having another argument. Does anybody here relate to any of those? And just show of hands if you do. Okay.
All 5.
All 5. Okay. Anybody want to add anything to that? Or is that, we'll just move on? All right. Let me just make sure nobody's like, okay. Okay. So one of the first things we have to do in order to shift out of these and to create a new way of talking with each other is we have to move. Let me just let somebody in here. We have to move out of autopilot and into awareness, right? So autopilot is we're just kind of doing things without really thinking about them. And one of the best examples of that is simply when you're driving the car and you arrive someplace and you're not even aware of how you drove there, right? You're like, oh, geez, I feel like I didn't even realize I was driving. It's because our subconscious mind has taken over, right? And thank God, because where would we be if it wasn't for our subconscious mind? And so this is how we operate in life a lot of times. We're just on autopilot. We're not really aware. So we have to bring our awareness to what's happening, what's causing the problems in those interactions, or we're not going to be able to change them. Okay, so that really is the first step towards change, is bringing your awareness to what's happening. So here's what most people think they need to do, and this is what I hear from a lot of clients, is they've got to get to solving the issues and the problems, and they have to address all of the issues, you know, past, present, future. And the most common thing people say is, I need a third party. We need a third party to come and mediate our discussions, like kind of tell us who's right and who's wrong. But that's not what you need. In fact, that is the kind of approach that I call a putting out fires approach, which means, okay, I can help you navigate and negotiate this one issue, you know, mediate, but then another issue is going to come up over here, and then another issue and another issue. So we're always putting out fires. People show up, they want to talk about, here's what we fought about this week, or here's the issue we had this week, which again is, you're always going to be trying to put out these fires. What you actually need is a different process of talking about the issues. You need to have a different way of talking so that you're able to talk about any issue and do it in a respectful and effective way, right? Because, and then the other piece about this is that every relationship has a set of perpetual problems. So it might be the thing that you argued about when you first got married, and, you know, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40 years later, you're probably still having that same disagreement. So when we talk about resolving issues, it's not always that we package it up really neatly and it's, okay, we've, you know, somebody's right, somebody's wrong, I get my way, you don't get your way. It's not like that. It's more about having these kinds of hard conversations, even when we disagree, but talking about it again in a different way, talking about it in a more respectful way, in a way where you are understanding each other. So it doesn't mean that these issues always completely go away. So the first thing I want to dive into is, and this is the first skill we're going to talk about, is how to be a good listener. And while it seems so basic for all of us, like, of course, many of us don't actually do it as well as we like to think that we do. Like perhaps outside of our family or our home, we tend to be good listeners, maybe with our girlfriends or other people just that we come in contact with. But when it comes to our relationship with our significant other, or maybe even our children, we're not such good listeners. So I want to talk about learning how to listen in a whole new way, right? It's hearing the words is easy, but it's what you do in those moments when you disagree or when you don't like what your partner is saying, right? What happens when you don't agree? What happens when you don't like what the other person is saying? Are you still able to stay calm, to listen without reacting, right? Chances are, if you're caught up in this kind of negative communication pattern, you're not doing a lot of listening. And again, that's where autopilot takes over. We get into these disagreements and we just start doing the things that we always do. We judge, we blame, we get defensive, talk over each other, and we argue to be right. These are the things that don't work. Can anybody relate to doing any of these things in conversation with their partner?
Oh, yeah.
Show of hands. Anyone? Anyone? Okay. All right. So here's what it takes. Here's what it takes to be a good listener. Number one, we have to listen without interrupting. Right, that's really hard. Again, if you're in the practice of just kind of talking over each other, arguing to be right, listen without interrupting. Listen to understand your partner's perspective, right? Because if we want to be heard by our partner, we have to model what that looks like. We have to be willing to go first. Right? We can keep complaining about what the other person is doing and how we're not being heard and we're not being understood. But what are we doing to show what it's like to actually listen? Right? We want to go first, and we want to be the person to model what it is we actually want in return. Right? So listening to understand, asking questions.
Denise?
Yeah.
Video.
Yeah. Somebody call me.
Somebody did.
Oh, somebody put something in the chat. Oh, someone needs to mute. Okay. I'll mute everybody. I can figure out how to do that. Can you guys all mute yourselves? Because I'm not sure how to do this while I'm on screen sharing.
Yeah, she's a love bug today.
Oops. Can everybody mute themselves? There we go. All right. Okay. Okay. Asking questions to learn more. Staying calm and curious. Managing your reactions, your emotional reactions. This is probably one of the most challenging parts, you know, for anybody that's kind of caught up in these emotional patterns or these reactive patterns, is controlling that urge to jump in and do the thing that you always do. So the fastest path to connection is curiosity. Curiosity, right? When we first got together, we were so curious. We wanted to learn all there was to learn about our partner. Somewhere along the way, we stopped being curious and we assume we know that all there is to know about our partner. So we stopped being curious. But chances are you don't. In fact, I've been working with a couple who, when they first came to see me, they'd been in these patterns of disconnect and arguing for a really long time. And it got to a point where they were really just kind of existing cordially. They have young children, so of course they have to interact throughout the day. But their arguments had been really explosive. And so they got to a point where they just did well, I'm just not going to say anything. And because each time they engaged in these conversations, neither person was listening to the other, right? So they stopped talking. So they shut down parts of themselves because they're like, why bother? But after we started to work together and after they started to practice these skills and engage in a different way and talk about things differently, and they really kind of were able to create some emotional safety between each other. And the emotional safety comes when we're not having these huge reactions to each other, right? So when you have a corrective experience where you can share something or your partner shares something and you can remain calm, it invites more and more conversation. Okay. I was just checking the chat there. Right. So the more that we're able to, and this is true of, like, I think about our children, or if you guys have, whoever has children, like when we have big reactions to the things that they share with us, then they're going to stop sharing. Right. But if we are able to stay calm and be curious and ask questions, then we invite them to share more. So getting back to the couple that I was talking about, one of the things that actually ended up coming out of that, once they had this emotional safety between them and they felt comfortable sharing with each other, the husband was actually able to share some thoughts and feelings about where they vacation during the winter, right? They'd been doing this same winter vacation in a ski resort for the past, all the years they've been together, which is probably like 15 plus years. And he wasn't really enjoying that, but he never felt okay to speak up and say that, because he was worried about what the reaction would be. He figured it would just end in an argument. It was easier to just go along to get along. Like, I'm just not going to say anything. All the while, he's going every winter and he's not enjoying it. He's feeling like he wants to do other things, but he didn't say it. But once they created this different way of talking with each other, he finally felt comfortable to share this. And he said, you know what? I want to do other things. I don't want to spend all my winters up in the mountain. And was that a hard conversation? Yes, it wasn't easy for her to hear, because they'd never had a conversation about something that they didn't agree on, where they actually listened to each other, right? And while it was hard for her to hear, they were able to stay in that moment and not have it completely explode, or have it break down, or have their connection break down. Even though they didn't agree and it was tense and it was uncomfortable, they were still able to stay connected, right? And so that's what being curious and managing your reactions can invite. It can invite the other person sharing more and you learning more. Because the more we know about each other, like when we go through moments like that, it actually deepens the connection and it deepens intimacy. Okay. Any thoughts, questions about that? Otherwise, I'm going to go on to the second skill. Everybody good? I'm going to take a sip of water. Okay.
Yeah, I'll just, you know what, Denise, a lot
Yeah.
of this, I teach communication, so this is not new to me, right?
Yes.
So business wise, it's very easy for me to do this, but when it comes to my 39 as of yesterday year-old relationship with my husband, who's my soulmate and I adore him, but we do all those the five checklists, guilty of all of them. So like, it's one thing to understand it intellectually, but it's another thing to implement it in the heat of the moment. That's what I have a challenge with.
Absolutely. So thank you for sharing, and happy anniversary. And isn't it funny that like we can teach this stuff, but when it comes to ourselves, it really can be a challenge, because we all have our own blind spots, right? Yeah. So thank you for sharing. Okay, so skill number 2 is the opposite of being the listener, is when you are the speaker or the initiator of conversation, when you're bringing up an issue, right? So how you bring up an issue matters. It's not what you say. We all know this. It's not what you say, but how you say it. And when you're bringing up a conversation, you want to be clear. What is the goal? What's my desired outcome here? A lot of us never even give that a second thought. We just kind of get in there and we unload. And it's the kind of unloading or blasting your partner that leads to the breakdown. Whoops. I think, how did that happen? Sorry about that, you guys. I don't know what happened there. There we go. So here's what typically happens. You blurt things out only when you're angry. You blame your partner. You're not specific. Whatever it is you're saying, it's really vague. And you maybe you've been holding on and now you're piling it on, right? You talk more about your partner than you do about yourself,
Mm.
and you don't talk about your feelings, right? Anybody relate to those things? Anyone? All right. So what does it really take to be a good initiator? Or to bring up a conversation with your partner? So number one, and most of us probably don't do this, is checking for readiness. And it's simple, like, is now a good time? Usually we just kind of step in there. We've got something on our mind. It feels really urgent. And we just kind of go after it. It's important to check your partner's readiness. And this was a really important thing that I learned in terms of applying that to my relationship with my kids. Now it's like, I actually will like knock on the door and ask, is it a good time? Versus just like, when you're feeling that emotion or you're feeling triggered, it's easy to just want to run in there and just, regardless of where the other person's at, just lay it all out. So checking for readiness is really important. Being clear about what you want to share, right? So this means not just thinking about how furious you are with your partner, but thinking about what is it that I'm actually upset about, right? We don't really do this. Again, we get triggered. We have the reaction that we always have, and it usually is focused on the other person. So much of when I'm talking about both being a good listener, being a good speaker, requires more of you, like what you're going to do and how you're going to change. Again, like I talked about before, the relationship with yourself, right? So be clear. What is it I'm upset about? Like really ask yourself. And only bring up one issue at a time, right? You can't go to your partner and then be like, and you did this, and then it was that, and then 5 weeks ago, that thing, and remember 6 years ago. And you have to be clear in your mind. What's the one thing I want them to understand right now? And you want to say it without blaming them. So I always invite people to think about, how do I say this in a way that doesn't blame my partner? And that requires much more effort. Like I've sat with people who are like, and I might have to like actually help them do that, because we're so used to thinking in a way where it's about the other person and not about ourselves. So run it through that filter of, is what I'm about to say blaming the other person? Is it going to make them look bad? How can I say it where I'm actually sharing about my own thoughts and feelings, right? Because when we're talking about you always, and you never, and you this, and you made me feel, instead of when this happened, I started to feel X, Y, and Z, or when you said that thing, I made it mean that you really didn't care. Right? Because there's what the other person says, what they mean, what we hear, what we make it mean. Right? And so much it gets lost in that translation. Right? Because your partner's saying one thing and meaning one thing, we're hearing it differently and we're making it mean something completely different. And we may walk away from that making an assumption about what they meant. Wait a second. That's why it's really important to check those things out. But first check with yourself, like, this happened. What am I making that mean right now? I wonder if that's what he meant. And checking it out, right? Turn complaints or demands into requests, right? Because most of what, again, when we're initiating something, we're talking about all the things that we don't want, all the things that we're annoyed about, or what they need to do, what they should do. How's that going to land? How do you think your partner's going to receive that? Because we don't really think about that. We're just thinking about kind of what we want, what we're mad about. How do you turn that into a request? And we can make requests. It doesn't mean that they always have to do the thing that we want them to do. Right? So that's where managing your reaction comes into place. Because if you get a response that isn't the one that you want or wanted, what are you going to do about that? How are you going to manage that internally within yourself? Right? And the other part about that is like, most of what we bring up is a complaint, a criticism, a demand, a you should, but we never really talk about what it is we do want. So it's important to think about that. And when you're getting clear about what you want to share, what's the outcome you're looking for? What is it you want them to understand? What is it I'm wanting from this situation? Because nothing gets solved if we just simply complain about what's not working. So I have an example of this. I was working not with the couple, but just with the woman. And she came to me because she was so frustrated with her husband. But at the same time, she didn't like who she had become in the relationship, because her reactions to him were like, she didn't like how she was reacting. She knew she was being really critical. She knew she was lashing out at him, but she didn't really see any other way. And there was some of, well, if he wouldn't do that, then I wouldn't have this reaction, which is kind of backwards, because again, the other person can do what they do, have the response they have. We decide how we want to show up to that. We always get to decide, right? So she came to me not really liking the way she was showing up. She had this story that I always do everything. He doesn't help out. And so she had this narrative about him that played out day in and day out. And then she would see all the ways that he wasn't helping out the way she thought he should, or the way that she was. Right. And what I was able to help her see was that, number one, is that even true? Are you doing everything? And when she really broke that down, she was like, well, no, here's all the ways that he helps out. Right. And so she was able to shift her perspective to see that, oh, okay, this whole story that I have is probably not completely true. If I'm wanting something else from him, rather than complaining and saying, here's all the things that I do, I'm doing everything all the time and you're not doing anything. It's like, what do you want him to understand? Like, you guys are both working hard. How can you say to him, I want more help in this area, this very specific area? Because while you just sit there and you complain about all these things, he feels like he can never get it right. And so he gets to a point where he feels like, well, why bother? Because no matter how I do it, it's never going to be good enough. Right. So she changed her approach in how she interacted with him. She began to appreciate the things that he was doing. She began to manage her own reactions in moments when she got triggered, getting clear with herself on what she really wanted, and then asking for it in a way that he could hear it. Completely changed their relationship. And she actually was somebody that didn't think it was possible when we started working together. She's like, I don't understand how this one person thing is really going to change this. I'm willing to give it a try, but I just don't see how it's going to happen. Right? Because she was locked in a mindset too, right, of just really believing all the things that she was telling herself. So at the end of it, she's like, yep, I didn't think it was possible, but here we are. All right. So both of these skills that I'm talking about really are about you growing your capacity to tolerate tension, right? Staying in the conflict, soothing yourself when you feel triggered, reflecting on yourself, getting clear on what your own thoughts, feelings, desires are, and increasing your capacity to not take things so personally. Right? So this is like the big shift, because we're so typically focused on what the other person is doing and wanting them to change so we don't have to have these reactions or we don't have to feel triggered. But the truth is, becoming a better listener, becoming a better initiator is about your capacity to do these things, to tolerate the tension, to manage when you feel triggered. So you're not exploding. So you're not criticizing, blaming, judging, but you're speaking about yourself, right? And not taking it personally. Like when I said, he says something, means something, you hear something, what do you make it mean? If we make it mean something about us, we're always going to feel this sense of like being offended, right? So maybe it's not always about us. That's an important thing to remember, because I think so when we're stuck in these patterns and we're feeling really hurt, we do have a tendency to make it all about us, that he said that or did that because what, he doesn't care, or what I say doesn't matter. But what if that's actually not true? We have to be willing to question that, to question our own thoughts. And that's where going back to getting out of autopilot and into awareness, the awareness is of yourself. And so that kind of leads into the third skill of the mindset piece, right? Because the skills 1 and 2 of listening and initiating, none of that really matters if you don't have your mindset on board, right? And so what does that look like? Mindset is like the stories that you tell yourself, what you choose to focus on, right? What are you looking for? And then these practiced thoughts, the things that we think in our brains every day, all day, are the things that become our beliefs, right? And then we operate from these beliefs. And often these beliefs don't really serve us. And what that looks like is we have labels for our partner, or we might even have labels for ourselves, right? He's so selfish. He doesn't care. He only cares about himself. Or whatever the case might be in your relationship, we typically have these labels for our partner. And we're like, this is who they are, right? They can't be any other way in our mind if we've already decided this is who they are. And so in the mindset piece of focusing, we focus on what we don't want or what's not going well. And we use global language like always and never, which again makes it seem like this is what it is. This is the truth. This is the reality. It can't be any other way. And then we stay parked in these negative emotions, these negative thoughts and emotions. And from that place, we collect evidence that supports that story. Right? So if in our minds we think he's selfish or he doesn't care, then we're looking at things through this lens where we see moments of time. Oh yeah, see, he just did that thing. I knew. Look how selfish he is. I knew he didn't care. Look, he's always doing this thing. Do you guys relate to that?
I think we all use the same language.
I think you're right. And you have to catch yourself, right? When you catch yourself when you're saying the always and the never, or that you've labeled your partner as whatever that label is, selfish or uncaring or okay. So we really want to practice a mindset that supports the relationship that you do want. So number one, you want to be clear on, right? Not what you don't want. What do you want your relationship to look like? How do you want it to be different? All right. And so how do we then practice having a mindset that supports the relationship we do want? Awareness of your thoughts, awareness of what that internal dialogue is that's playing over in your mind every day. Questioning those thoughts, not believing all of them. Just because you think them over and over again doesn't mean they're true. Right? You want to remember that. Not all your thoughts are true. It's just simply like beliefs that we have are nothing more than thoughts that we think over and over and over again. Right? That's what a belief is. So, of course, if you think the same thought over and over again, it's going to become a belief that gets deeply ingrained. Doesn't mean it can't be changed, but you have to notice, there I go thinking that thing again. Is that even true? What else could be true? Right. And then we want to work on balancing the scale. And what I mean is like right now, you're probably in the mindset or, you've got that lens on where you're seeing everything through this negative filter, looking for the evidence to support the narrative you have. And the reason that you can't see the other stuff, the more, the good stuff, the stuff that is working is simply because you're not looking for it. Right. And so when I say balance the scales, I mean, start to look for the places where things are going well. And if you're thinking, I can't find anything, then I would say that you're not looking hard enough. Right. Because we can always find what we're looking for. So if you're looking for the negative, you will find it. If you're looking for the positive, you will also find that. So when your mind is going in that direction, you could challenge yourself to look for something on the positive, to look for something you can appreciate about your partner, about your relationship, about something that's going well in your relationship. Right? That's the way you break the pattern. That's the way you break the thought patterns. That's the way you start to undo the habit of thinking in the same old way. Right? And cultivating a practice of appreciation. What is something you appreciate about your partner? Again, if you don't know, then you haven't thought long enough about it. Right? And start small. One small thing, right? And the more you do that, it just like builds on each other. And then you strengthen that muscle of looking for those things that you can appreciate. And when we appreciate, we feel better. And we feel more connected and we feel more loving. And so that also applies to relationship with self. How do you talk to yourself? Right? Our relationships are a mirror of us. Right? So if we're being judgy and critical, and we have all sorts of shoulds for our partner, chances are we have those for ourselves. I would say we definitely do. Right? So how are you talking to yourself? Are you loving and appreciating yourself? Are you being kind to yourself in the way you talk to yourself? Are you judging yourself? Like, oh, that was really stupid. I can't believe I did that. What an idiot I am. Or, shaming yourself for know, not cleaning the house, or, oh, I was going to get to the gym and I didn't, and now you just beat yourself up. Like, you really want to be on to how you're talking to yourself. Right? Because when you change that and you start to be kinder and more compassionate and less judgmental to yourself, then you're naturally going to show up that way with other people in your life, including your partner. All right. Whoop. Oh. Okay. So we're getting close to the end. So we're just going to recap the things that we talked about today, what it really takes to be a good listener. We talked about, listening without interrupting, being able to manage your own internal reactions, bringing curiosity into the mix, learning to understand your partner's perspective. We talked about how to initiate so you can be heard and understood, checking for their readiness, being clear with yourself about what it is you want to bring up, what you want them to understand, what the goal is, and doing this in a way that doesn't blame your partner, and talking more about your own feelings than talking about the other person. And that goes to shifting. It's about shifting your focus from your partner to yourself. And it takes a daily practice to change these patterns. They absolutely can be changed. You just have to commit to doing it every day, not just once. It's like something that just becomes your new habit. Until doing things the other way, it becomes to a point where you don't have to think about it. And mindset is crucial to the success of your relationship. More important than anything, because if you're doing the things like working on being a good listener or working on being a good initiator, but in your mind, you're still thinking like your husband's a jerk or your partner's a jerk, it's the energy that you bring to that is not going to work, even if you're doing all the things. So the great news is all of these things can be learned. It just takes time, practice, commitment to something different, right? If you are sick and tired of being in the place that you are and you want something different, but have felt stuck and feeling like, I don't know how to get out of this place, know that it's completely possible. And here's what's possible when you get support around your relationship and support around learning these skills. You can start to feel at ease with your partner, be more relaxed, and enjoy each other's company. You can feel free to fully be yourself, express your thoughts, feelings, desires without fear of it ending in an argument. You're able to communicate in a supportive, open, collaborative way, even when you don't agree with each other. You'll experience confidence and pride in how you handle challenges that do arise. You'll start to feel happy in your marriage, excited about the life that you have together and the future that awaits you. So if any of you are interested, I want to invite you to book a 30-minute marriage breakthrough call. If this is something you would want to go deeper on, we can talk about what are the biggest challenges in your relationship right now. How do you want your marriage to be different? And then I'll map out for you a plan of what I think it will take for you to get there. And then we can talk about whether or not it's a fit for us to work together. And you can do that at the link below, the chatwithdenise.as.me is the direct link. And then the one below is my website, where you can check out more information about how I work, but also you could schedule a call through my online calendar, which is linked on my website. So now I'm gonna stop sharing to open it for any questions. Give me a second. Let me see how I do this. Oh, there we are. All right, you guys. Any thoughts, questions?
I'll go. I just have an observation because I actually, my marriage is great. It's a relatively new marriage. We do have communication things to work on for sure. So some of these tips are very useful. But what I've realized is one of my daughters communicates in very much the same way that my ex-husband did when we had huge issues communicating. And I'm like looking at these thinking, I'm going to try to apply these to her more than my marriage, because it's just, I mean, she's only 11. She won't get the complexity of it all, but
Right.
if I can be a better listener, a better communicator, all of the things help her with her mindset, which I've been trying to do. But, it's just good, like you said at the beginning, good to apply to other relationships in your life.
Yeah, no, that's great. And amazing that you have the tools and you can be teaching her at such a young age, right? Because I mean, I certainly didn't learn any of this stuff until, 10, 15 years ago. So that's awesome.
Yeah.
I love that.
Because her dad still communicates in the same way. So I'll still apply this to my dealings with him in our co-parenting relationship.
Yes, that's awesome. That's great. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Anyone else want to share or have a question?
I just thank you for doing this. And I just finished a book called Peak Mind. So a lot of this sounded to that word peak mind when you were explaining a lot of the stuff. And what the book encouraged was a 12-minute practice, which I kind of like because it allows you to see how much our attention and thought processing go out the window and they just fly away all the time.
Yeah.
So to be able to get in touch with that, I think is an essential piece to everything you have expressed today, which it all fits. And it's really where our minds are that are the essence of a happy, healthy conversation, relationship. And it's so easy to lose sight of that. And that's why we have such listening issues.
Right. Absolutely.
We don't even realize that a bird just took our attention away or a whatever. So I really found exactly every word you said to fit within that. And for me, it's paying attention to some sort of practice. So I am practicing this 12 minutes of, it's great when you catch yourself losing your attention. And it's just making me more self-aware, which I think is another big piece that you talked about, the looking in the mirror. And we all know this. Do we want to agree with it? Maybe not. But, I have a happy marriage of 39 years and I say I have a good marriage, but I want a great marriage.
Yes.
And that's the goal by doing this stuff is keep, and we have a son who just got married. So we definitely want to be able to be that model or voice of, the life is this.
Yes, absolutely. That's great. Thank you. Thank you for sharing. What was the name of the book, did you say?
Peak Mind.
Peak Mind.
I think it's something JHA is his last name or hers.
Peak Mind. Okay. Let me check it out.
Yeah, it's really cool.
Thank you for sharing.
Sure.
Yeah, I think sometimes people think, I know my husband certainly thinks that, if you love each other enough and you've been married all these years, somehow it will just magically
work itself out.
itself out. Yeah. And I think it's interesting that I don't know how many professional women are on the call today, but we spend so much money and time investing in our work, our careers, our jobs, our professions. And then we don't spend any time or money investing in the communication of our lifelong relationship.
Right.
So
Yeah.
yeah, thanks for the work that you do, Denise, and thanks for this.
Yeah, no, it's my pleasure. Thank you for coming. All right.
Yeah, I'll just add on to that quickly because I know you're out of time, but just, it's easy enough to say, I'm going to get myself in better shape. I'm going to do all these things, but it's better to go to the gym and really work on it every day and do all these things. So, like Janet said, with professional development, all those kinds of things, I completely agree that in our personal lives, this is the kind of stuff that matters to kind of keep you focused and moving in the right direction. And obviously, I totally appreciate all the stuff that you talked about today. I think, and mindset for me is huge. So,
Yes.
so
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah, I think it is for all of us, and not just like in our relationships, just in our everyday life. So.
Mm-hmm.
So, well, thank you, ladies, and thank you for coming. I will be sending out the recording for anybody that wants to watch it again or catch anything from the slides. Yeah, and if anybody's interested, again, you can schedule a time to chat with me and see if you want to take this work deeper.
Sounds great.
All right, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a wonderful day.
You too.
Bye.
You too.